Hi, everyone. Paul Heinze, Goldberg Heinze Business Advisors. It's my pleasure to have a friend and a very, very competent attorney with us today in this session. Greg Wright is with the Varnum Law Firm in the greater Detroit area. Very competent and highly revered attorney. And he's got a few observations, a few comments, and a few things that are new to share with us that might, in these times, be of significant help to you. Greg, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you too. Great. Excellent. Good to see you again, Paul.
What's new? Tell us about what comes to mind and what our business owner viewers should be paying attention to.
Sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Just to sort of start off, I've got about 15 years of experience in assisting business owners and businesses sort of manage their customer and vendor relationships and then realize growth through the acquisition and sale of businesses and assets. So I do like to keep my ear to the ground for issues that affect business owners and the sorts of clients that you and I serve, Paul. And one of the issues I think that's come up into the news within the last week certainly has been the security of deposits at banks. I mean, there've been a couple of bank failures, one on the West Coast with Silicon Valley Bank, and then over the weekend, Signature Bank in New York as well. And there's also been a reduction in the equity values of some of these financial institutions. I'm not in a position to make any sort of recommendations on equity investments, but I do think that depositors can be very confident in the security of their deposits, so long as some common sense is sort of observed. The FDIC will insure deposits up to $250,000 at those institutions the FDIC covers, most state and federally chartered banks. The National Credit Union Association does the same thing for credit unions throughout the country. And that $250,000 limit can actually be used a little bit. You can open multiple accounts within a single institution. And if they're different character, one's personal, one's business, you can expand that $250,000 to $500,000.
Yeah.
You can also do the same thing by spreading the excess across accounts at a number of banks. They'd all be lovely. Hey, very happy to see you. Or to open a brokerage account, which usually has additional protections. That said, the FDIC will step in the event of a bank failure, take a bank over, usually over the weekend. And as a depositor, if you come in on Monday, you're likely to have more or less immediate access to your account. Again, provided that you don't clear that $250,000 threshold or special arrangements aren't made.
Yes, good. That's the fear factor is the one to deal with right off the bat. Yeah. And with that assurance and that protection level, I remember some years ago it was 100,000, and now they've booted it up, I think, after 2008. Now you've got some uncertainty. You've got it coupled with inflation, and you've got energy cost concerns, and you've got the cost of money to banks, and borrowing credit availability is reducing. What's that doing in your world? What is happening to clients, and how can you share remedies that might be sensible?
Sure. So, I mean, inflation has certainly been a significant issue over the last number of years, as has reliance upon the supply chain. I think some of those issues are starting to come a little bit more under control. I think we're out of the woods necessarily yet, but we're getting there. And I know there have been a number of business owners who have been holding on a bit, to make a determination as to when to divest themselves of their companies, or potentially to bring in new investment, or divest themselves of a part of their ownership. And I think, despite the fact that there have been some increasing costs of capital here over the last year or so, we've gone certainly from a prime rate of 4% or so up to 7 3/4. The federal funds rate's gone from virtually nothing to almost 5%. So there are fewer options necessarily in terms of getting that capital. That said, there are buyers that are still out there and interested in engaging with sellers, particularly high quality sellers. There may not be quite as many buyers out there, and the process may be a little bit more drawn out than it was before. Diligence is likely to be a little bit more intense, I suppose. And that's simply just because there may not be as many letters out there to purchase. However, there was as much dry powder for private equity out there last year as in almost any year in the past decade. The activity has been very good, and where private equity has stepped back a touch, strategic investors have an opportunity to come in and maybe pick up some of those good deals.
Good.
Valuations, again, generally good. Maybe not quite what they were at the peak of the mania just prior pandemic, but they are still quite good. And to the extent that you're willing to work with an appropriate investment broker to help take a look at your balance sheet, to take a look at the assets that you have, and help put your offer together to a potential buyer, if you're willing to do that, there are good opportunities to realize, the benefits of hard work over years and the growth that you've seen in a business. And so I do think this is a good time to take stock to determine whether or not you'd like to be in it for the next 5 years as the captain of the ship, maybe one of several, or whether or not this is a good opportunity to potentially realize the fruits of your labors.
I think what you're double underlining, and I couldn't help but agree more, that there seems to be a barrage or an inordinately large amount of concern surrounding the business owner and the business. There seems to be an inclination to make rash or a series of decisions, multiple decisions, without really the appropriate amount of conversation and advice. I think you'll agree with me that the business owner can benefit greatly by surrounding himself or herself with advisors that have a constructive, balanced outlook, that are interested in the client's success, and taking issues by a factual basis, taking them apart and deflating the emotion from them so that sensible decisions can be made. I think you would agree with that.
I would completely agree with that. And I think one of the ways that you avail yourself of that sort of experience is to find someone who has seen the business climate over a long period of time, has seen these cycles in and out, up and down, and understands sort of what the impact of various economic factors has on the market and on the potential transaction. Obviously, for many individuals in middle market businesses, their business can be like a child to them. It can be their retirement package. It can be an extraordinary investment of time and energy and interests over a long period. And it's important that you find people who can make sure that you receive the value that you deserve for that, and also that can give you direct and I think useful advice on how to engage with other folks in the marketplace.
Let's talk a moment about private equity and banking funds availability. I think you hit on something that needs just a little bit more airtime, and that has to do with the very specific private equity firms that are looking to acquire or create a relationship, some sort of a license or alliance relationship. Those people who are generally experts in a business owner's business as well, and can speak the talk and walk the walk and so forth and so on. Banks are going to make it very, very difficult for most people to be qualified for lending. Don't be misled by a private equity or investment banking group that appears to be wide open and ready to give you loan availability almost at the blink of an eye. Our firm get announcements of lenders saying your availability now is up to $600,000, and just give us a call and we'll start. Be careful there, but don't overlook the private equity source as the ultimate location and resting place for your business should you want to get out and sell. But planning for this is critically important, and in an attorney's position, an attorney can be of incredibly sound help to airing out the upside and the downside and the no side to a particular issue. And I know Greg has decades of experience in this particular area. What do you think about outside boards of advisors as opposed to directors, Greg?
I mean, I do see, you're talking about sort of advisory boards, independent
Yeah.
advisory boards, separate and apart from boards of directors.
Yes.
I do see that in some circumstances as an opportunity to bring in expertise, outside of sort of the inner circle. It can be very dependent on the actual ownership of a company and what sort of control it wants, and candidly how open it is to outside suggestion and assistance. It can be a tool for maintaining strong relationships with with outside parties of various kinds, but it's not for everyone, certainly. That said, I completely agree with the point that you made about working with outside advisors in terms of determining the value of your business, determining the place in the marketplace, and trying to make sure that your business is in a position where it has maximum value and is seen to have maximum value if you're seeking to take it to the market and test that. You wouldn't necessarily try and sell your house on your own. Some people do it. I good for them, I suppose. But I think there's certainly value there in having an independent review of the business and of what it has to offer, the value of the secret sauce, as it were, and structuring it once you have a deal in a way that is beneficial to all parties as it can be.
In the event that an owner is in a pivotal position to begin planning without extraordinary pressures or concerns, but they're viewing the fact that they may want to travel or enjoy grandchildren out of state, what are some of the early concerns, planning stages, or things to be aware of to begin the process for bringing your business to market? What do you refer to when you talk to your clients about that?
So, I mean, I think some of it is to try and take a look and do your own internal sell side diligence up front and make a determination as to what, if anything, you would want to adjust in order to put your best foot forward with potential buyers, potential lenders. So that could start with just taking a look at, at your financial statements for the last couple of years, understanding that there'll be a window of several years during which a lender or potential purchaser, anyone conducting evaluation is going to be reviewing your financials. You may want to sit down with a professional, with an accountant, with a business broker, and walk through how those are structured and make a determination as to whether or not there are any assets that could be sold off, whether or not there's any improvement that could be made to the business model to get a little bit of time under you before you go to market going forward. I would certainly talk to an attorney in terms of identifying large red flag issues, anything as simple as your corporate books and records to make sure that they're in reasonable shape, to make sure that if you have outside lending, that you're not tripping anything there, and that your relationships with any debt holders those are good relationships, and that issues involving environmental or real estate points are also taken care of properly. And then at that stage, hopefully you're in a position to speak with someone about valuation, someone on a business broker level, to determine what your business is worth. If you're in a position where you want to market it now, or whether you could do a little bit of work on it, replace the roof as it were, or get a couple of new appliances for the interior and see if that ups the value for you going forward. But that should give you an idea of where you're at and put the business in the best position to be successful when it hits the market.
Does your firm offer valuation services for corporations interested in selling?
We don't do valuations directly, but we certainly provide referrals, and we have trusted providers that we work with on that front. So that would be one of our first discussions with a potential client if they don't really have an independent understanding of what
It would seem to me that you provide non-disclosure agreements to your clients when this whole process begins, which in our view is a critical first step as well.
Yes.
Don't start giving out your financial statements to people unless you have the protection of a non-disclosure agreement. So the message here to everyone viewing is embrace the professional expert advice and support that you really need to begin the process, even if it's 3 years or more before you actually go to market with your company. That's an essential possibility. What about the descending, the objectionable shareholder and multiple shareholder circumstances? What do we do with cases like that when Aunt Jenny out in Iowa decides not to take her 15.5% and jump on the bandwagon? What do we do?
Well, that's a highly fact-specific question, right? I mean, depending on what the governing documents say and what you're willing to stomach in terms of either a personal dispute with your aunt going forward or limitations on the structure of the deal that you might have to accept. I mean, there are ways to structure around a recalcitrant shareholder and then potentially squeeze them out later on. Again, depends on what the governing documents of the business say and the particular jurisdiction you're working in. Oftentimes, the best approach is to try and gain a better understanding of why a recalcitrant shareholder isn't interested in selling the business. Sometimes if you can get to the root of that disagreement, you can come up with some way to either bridge whatever gap there is there, be it concern about valuation, concern about the pacing of a payout, the ultimate disposition of what might have been a family business. And again, professionals can assist with that in ways that it may be difficult to do within a family or within a close group of shareholders.
In getting near the end of our session, let's look at the concept of merger. It's probably one of the areas that is most misunderstood by the owners of smaller business. We often get people calling saying, I'd like to merge my business with one of my suppliers. Some general comments on merger versus sale or consolidation. What's your 30,000-foot view of that?
Sure. So the structure that you choose to use in any sort of business combination, again, ends up being a very fact-specific matter, and it depends on the assets and liabilities of each of the businesses and the tax position that the individual businesses and their owners find themselves in. Oftentimes, a merger will be used as a part of an acquisition that really is more of a stock deal, but the tax lawyers have us structure it in such a way that you get an appropriate change in the basis of the assets of the business. The concern about a merger, generally speaking, if you're merging with an entity you haven't controlled, is that you are exposing the assets of each of those two entities to the liabilities of each of those two entities. So you have to do extraordinarily good due diligence on a merger to make sure that you're not assuming liabilities by merging those two entities together. That would, otherwise there would be protection afforded by the two separate entities if you didn't. That's why oftentimes, I think asset deals have become more and more common over recent decades, just because there are so many things that you can do with them. Stock deals often come into play where liabilities aren't as much of a concern, or the seller has a lot of leverage, or there are integration issues with things like permitting, or licensure, or contract consents. Merger's a little less common, but again, it's in very specific circumstances, it can be a solution.
This all points to you viewing us in this session that an advisor with knowledge and giving you the one thing that I know Greg insists on, and we do as well, and that is know your options. Don't make a knee-jerk mistake decision that will come back to haunt you. Get good advisors that want to see you succeed and are not trying to get you to decide something that they sell. Get independent advisors in your corner. The business is probably the biggest cluster of assets that you have, and there is no rewinding, no room for error. Greg, thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll look forward to another session one day soon, or if there are grave actions going on with our government, perhaps we will assemble a lot sooner than we thought. Good to see you, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks.